Welcome to Keep Calm and Carry On. My name is Lorraine Webb and I am the Programme Officer for Children and Youth Work for the United Reformed Church. This webinar has been put together for leaders of Pilots groups, our non-uniformed organisation, and other children's groups within the URC and beyond. My background is that I'm a teacher, or was until 3 years ago, and through working in mainstream with children from the age of 9 to 13, I gradually became interested in the ones who couldn't or wouldn't learn. And so as our school became a trial school for integration, I became Senko and I started to work with a wide variety of learning and behavioural difficulties. When I left teaching for a break, I went to work with Action for Children as a respite carer with children with complex health needs and multiple and profound disabilities. And then from there, I went into special school teaching children from the age of 4 to 19 with a wide variety of difficulties. As if that weren't enough, I'm also the adoptive parent of 2 boys, now grown up, who experienced difficult starts in their lives and who, as a result, have shown varying degrees of behaviour which challenges. So, I'm going to ask you firstly, nobody is ever perfectly behaved, are they? I wonder what was the naughtiest thing that you have ever done, and I wonder why you did it. I'm going to show you now a picture of a naughty baby. The baby just will not shut up, no matter what the mother does. Are they, though, badly behaved? How did you feel when I described that baby as being naughty? Similarly, my partner, when he sometimes comes home from work, I'll race down to see him and he'll come in, he'll shut the door firmly behind him, throw his bag into a corner and he'll storm back past without even speaking into the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee. That's really rude, isn't it? He's obviously being naughty. Maybe it's just that he doesn't like me. He wants to upset me. These behaviours aren't personal. The baby and my partner are both communicating. The baby is communicating a need or a discomfort. And actually that baby, as you may have seen, had colic. But it could have been a dirty nappy, could have been overtired, needing sleep, could be hungry. We don't get cross with a baby or punish it. And similarly, my partner, when an adult is grumpy and irritable, if that relationship means anything to us, we try not to get cross or to punish them. We try to understand, to ask questions, to behave in a calming manner to help the other person calm down. When a child behaves in a non-socially acceptable way, it follows that we need to begin to understand what they're telling us through their behaviour and why, so that we can stop taking it personally and begin to put things in place that help them regulate the way they behave. Before I go any further, I want to state here and now that there's no magic wand that will turn a child whose behaviour challenges into a sweet, compliant little angel. And to be honest, I'm glad there isn't, because a world of sweet, compliant little angels would be a sad, sad place. So, how do we begin to understand behaviour? Here we are, sailing happily along, when we come across some behaviour which challenges. We see fists and feet, running, shouting, crying, stealing, pinching, foul language, non-compliance, rudeness, fidgeting, snatching. The list is endless and it's in our way. But we know with icebergs that there's more underneath than meets the eye. Instead of sailing along merrily and getting irritated by the behaviour that we see getting in our way, let's adopt a different approach. Let's get in our submarine and go down to investigate what's happening deep below where we can't see it. What is at the root of the behaviour we observe on the surface? Because only then can we begin to negotiate a safe and smoother passage. All these things can be the underlying cause of the behaviour we observe. So let's have a look at these in a little more detail. They may have needs that haven't been met. They may be hungry, thirsty, tired, or need the toilet. And they may not know how to express this to you. They may not even know that that's what they're feeling. They may have a want. They may crave a particular toy for some deep reason. Or they may be craving friendship and not know how to go about setting it up. It could be their health. They could feel unwell, have a headache or a sore foot, a toothache. They may need glasses, or they may be hearing impaired. They may have brain trauma, or even a paper cut. There may be things going on at home. The family they may have come from where the family were arguing. There may be a bereavement or depression, alcoholism. There may be an impending divorce. They may have an absent parent. All of these things can affect them. Communication. They may not be able to express. They may have difficulty understanding. They may have a limited vocabulary or have misunderstood or misinterpreted something that you've said or done. They may have sensory needs, and I'll explain a little more about this in my next webinar. They may have problems with their social skills. They may not have learned the skills of turn-taking, waiting, questioning, interaction. Attachment. They may not feel that they can trust, or they may be craving attention. Overload, again, is something we'll look at more tomorrow. But what about challenge? The level of challenge may be too little for them, so they may be bored. Maybe too great, so they feel that they will, if they risk having a go at it, it will lead to failure. Or it may just be inappropriate for them. Previous experience and expectations. What happened last time? Have they had bad experience of previous interactions, relationships? Are they expecting things which even maybe aren't even going to happen? And of course we come to the question, why can't they just tell me that? But that's not the way. And very often it's not the way with us either. How many times have you been asked, is something the matter? And you've replied, no, I'm fine. In this section, we're going to look at a bit of detail of 3 of the most deep-seated things which may be affecting behaviour. I can guarantee you'll come across the first 2 amongst the children you encounter from week to week. The third is less common, but still something you may meet. And the important thing to say about all three of these is, like with additional needs, these are not something that you will cure. They're all pervasive issues that are deep-seated in the development of the brain. The first of these are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. The term originated from a research study conducted by the US health maintenance organization Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that were originally published in America. But the study has since been carried out in several different settings internationally, all yielding the same results. It was discovered that adverse childhood experiences can have extensive and enduring implication throughout the child's life, right through adulthood, and even culminating in earlier death than is average for the general population. ACEs fall into three main classifications: abuse, physical, sexual or verbal; neglect, physical or emotional; household, addiction, mental health problems, domestic violence, incarceration, separation or divorce. There are some secondary influences too, such as bullying, community deprivation, poverty, bereavement, and neighbourhood violence. And now we could probably add to that COVID pandemics. The more of these that a child experiences, the more devastating the results. This is described as toxic stress and can have long-term effects on a child's health, behaviour and life chances. From the infographic on our left, we can see that only 36% of children negotiate childhood without falling victim to any of these adverse childhood experiences. 26% of children experience one, a further 16% experience two, just under 10% experience three, and just over 12% of children will experience 4 or more ACEs during their childhood. If we think of the average class of 30 children, that's 3 children who will have experienced significant life-changing toxic stress, and you may know nothing about it. Of course, not all stress is bad. We all need a certain amount of stress and challenge in our lives to help us to grow and develop. A challenge, such as learning to ride a bike or delivering training to 30 people over Zoom, causes the release of hormones, including adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone. We either recognise our limitations and step back from the challenge, having learned where our limits are, or the burst of adrenaline boosts our performance and we learn that we can do it. We then go into a period of recovery while the adrenaline levels gradually drop and we relax. And the neural connections within our brains grow. But toxic stress is different. It starts the same, with the same hormones being released. But you can see that there is no opportunity for recovery. The child is in a constant high state of high alert. The flight or fight hormones go into overdrive, causing an emotional reaction, but also a physical one, putting strain on the heart, increasing the blood pressure, tensing the muscles, heightening the senses. Multiple areas of the brain are affected and the neural connections are damaged. The effect can be mitigated by a caregiver supporting the child. Those relationships are invaluable, and care can enable the child to relax and recover in between dealing with the toxic stresses. But you can begin to see how the effect can be long-lasting and influence in so many different ways. The child who has a constantly heightened level of fight or flight hormones will misread signals as threat. Even your attempts to come alongside them and build relationship may be misinterpreted or feared. This brings us on to attachment disorder, which again affects many of the children we may come into contact with, especially those who've come through the care system, but not exclusively so. Attachment disorder comes in varying degrees of severity. My own children, who are both adopted, come at diametrically opposite ends of the spectrum. These children will also have adverse childhood experiences, but will have lacked a consistent and sufficient caregiver. The three causes of attachment disorder are that physical and emotional needs are not met, and there is inconsistent caregiver or caregivers. The child learns from a very early age that they cannot trust others to meet their needs. As they cry and they're not attended to adequately, their survival instincts set in. They stop trusting others. They may even stop crying. The outcome is a near permanent impairment, which affects 4 areas. Relationships, as you may expect, learning, obsessions, and behaviour. These manifest them in these ways, among others. They may be disorganised and forgetful, slow to learn new concepts. It may affect their maths and literacy skills, and they may have immature speech. These children may sabotage relationships, so they may deliberately break down a relationship or undermine a relationship because they're afraid it's going to happen anyway, and this gives them a degree of control. They may be clingy or aggressive. They may be affectionate to strangers, and this, as you can imagine, puts them in a very vulnerable position. They may resist affection, and they may be hostile to their parents. It's always very important to remember that what you see and what happens at home may be very very different. And if parents are saying that they're finding behaviour a challenge at home or attitudes a challenge at home, and yet that child is very sociable and clingy towards you, very affectionate towards you, you may be looking at attachment disorder, and those parents may need some support. They may have obsessions. They may have an obsession with food that leads to hoarding, gorging, hiding food. Or they may have an obsession with death and violence, fire, blood, gore, and weapons. And it may affect their behaviour. These are the children who will question everything and who need to have control. This may be very subtle. For example, you may ask a child to pass you something, and they seem to be willing. They'll pick it up and they'll put it on the table near you, but they haven't actually passed it to you. You have to reach and pick it up yourself. They may be very impulsive. They don't stop to consider consequences. In fact, they possibly don't even understand consequences and cause and effect. These are the children that will take risks and very often will steal. They can have very destructive behaviour. This may range from self-harm to hurting other people to damaging property, including their own. These are the children who really have no attachment to the things that they own and may destroy them. And as it gets more extreme, you may see a lack of conscience. these children don't have an understanding of remorse and will make eye contact and be very convincing when lying, possibly because they believe it themselves. This brings us on to pathological demand avoidance, which is equally difficult to bond with or to get through to. It's distinct from autism, but on the spectrum, and is an internal cause rather than the previous two, which are external causes, making permanent changes to the body and brain. It's characterised by a need to resist the ordinary everyday demands that are made by others. And this resistance seems to be a response to a constant state of extreme anxiety. Children with pathological demand avoidance can be manipulative and impulsive. They may appear to have social skills, but these are superficial and based on mimicry. Their behaviour may be obsessive, and it is equally found in males as in males. Now we come to the really useful bit, the bit you've been waiting for, the behaviour toolkit. What will help us deal with situations where a child's behaviour begins to disrupt the session, and what will help us to plan so that those situations are avoided. The first step has to be to stop, look and listen. Don't react straight away without taking a step back. Observe what is happening, listen to the interactions and work out, do you really need to intervene? What may be affecting your judgment? And what do you know which may help you? A very key thing to think about is safety. First of all, safety of other children, your volunteers and the child themselves. And secondly, the safety of property. If any of those are in danger, then some action is needed. If they're not, it might be worth just letting it pass. Take notes and keep records. This must be factual and objective, and you shouldn't record names unless necessary. Remember GDPR, and also remember that a parent can ask to see these records. So only record what is necessary. Do not keep a black book of every misdemeanour. But when we do take notes, these are the important things to remember. The antecedent. What were the circumstances before it? When, where did it happen? Was it at a certain activity? Was it a certain time of year? What might have been the trigger? Then what behaviour did you observe? And here you need to be specific and objective. Don't just say, David kicked off. Kicked off is a very disrespectful term anyway, but it tells me nothing about what he did. Did he just sit there with his arms folded and refuse to join in? Or did he kick Sarah on the kneecap? What behaviour did you observe? And what were the consequences? What did they achieve by what they did? What happened as a result? And also, how did you deal with it? And now you can start to look for patterns. What can we learn from this? Can you tell when they're starting to get a bit edgy or when things are likely to take a turn for the worse? What works for this child? Building relationships is a real key to challenging behaviour. Remember, it's not personal. They're trying to communicate. Greet them by name on arrival and say goodbye when they leave. It sounds an obvious thing to say, but it so often doesn't happen. You may be dreading that child coming to your session, and so your face may show it as they arrive, but make a special effort to say, "Hi, Suzanne, it's really lovely to see you tonight." And remember to say goodbye, not good riddance, when they leave. I love this one. Catch them being good and acknowledge it. We're so focused when a child has been described to us as naughty at trying to catch them being bad, at expecting them to be naughty all the time. And we sometimes forget that the majority of the time they're doing fine. So catch them being good and let them know. Just a very gentle, "Oh, you're playing really nicely there." Or it's lovely to see you two playing together. Look for the likable in them and share it with them. Tell them, "Oh gosh, you've got a lovely smile. That really cheers me up when I see you." Seek them out for a one-to-one game. Keep your approach positive. Smile, share a joke, share eye contact. Actually actively set about building that relationship with them. Never criticize a child or put them down. Avoid sarcasm. Don't raise your voice or punish. Sarcasm is one of those strange things. Some children actually like sarcasm. Most don't. But the difference is it a shared joke or is it used to put somebody down? If it's a shared joke, that's fine. If the child enjoys it, that's fine. But sometimes they may smile or laugh when they're actually uncomfortable. So try and avoid sarcasm. Clean slate. This is a tough one. As soon as something is over, it's a clean slate. Don't hold grudges. This is so difficult to do and it feels counterintuitive. But don't see the things they do as cumulative. Each time, it's a clean slate. Try not to expect something bad to happen or interpret things as bad. If you've got that impression of a child's behaviour, they may be doing something that any other child would get away with. And if that's the case, let them get away with it too. Don't just interpret it as yet another sign of their bad behaviour. I use the words bad behaviour because that's a negative way to look at it. What we're actually talking about is behaviour which challenges. Behaviour which makes it difficult for you to proceed normally with what you'd planned to do. Try not to take things personally. Swap staff if you're finding it difficult to remain positive or calm and take time out. This is okay. In your team briefing before or after your group session, reiterate the fact that it is okay to take time out if you need to, or to swap. Debrief if you need to. Don't take it home with you. Get it off your chest before you leave the building. Which brings us to alarm bells. You don't want things happening that disrupt your session. You don't want a child to get to that stage where they can no longer control their behaviour, can no longer regulate themselves. So what can we do to preempt that? Let's deal with the easy one first. If they're hungry or thirsty, find a way to feed them or provide drinks. A really good way of doing it, if they get hungry, if they arrive hungry, is choose them to help you prepare snack. And then when you're in the kitchen preparing the snack, they can surreptitiously have a little bit of advanced snack. But if the children in general have to choose between Amy hitting and kicking, or Amy having a biscuit when they don't get one, I think I know which they'll prefer. Children are very good at understanding other children. Sometimes eye contact is enough. The child feels seen and recognised. So that little look from the side of your eye is sometimes enough once you've got relationship. Provide the attention they seek. I hate the term attention seeking because they're not if they're seeking attention, it's because they need a bit of attention. Just like if a baby is crying, they may just need a cuddle. It's not attention seeking, it's a need. So provide that attention for them before they have to use their behaviour to get your attention in a negative way. Encourage them to come and help you do something. Give them a responsibility. Make a special effort to do something particularly with that child. Distract them. A change of activity or a change of environment will often redirect a child into doing something else. And again, as I said before, a change of personnel. Don't take it personally. A change of approach may be helpful. And it's always good to give a subtle offer or an excuse for the person to hand over. So, for example, Fred needs to talk to you in the kitchen. It's all right, I'll take over playing with Amelia. You go and deal with Fred. Maybe they need to run around. There's a lot of children whose behaviour needs them to have some physical movement. So provide opportunities for increased physical activity within your planning. Start the session with an activity to let them run off a bit of steam, and make sure your programme is varied. Don't go from one seated, still activity that they've got to be quiet in to another seated, still activity that they've got to be quiet in. And if that is going to happen, maybe take them outside or into another room for a game. Remember safeguarding. You are okay to be alone with a child as long as you are in a place which is accessible to others and where you can be seen and heard. So if you're in outside and people are watching through the window, that's absolutely fine. Give them opportunity to opt out. What could they have, something that they could do instead? And how can they signal that they need to opt out rather than by hitting or kicking or shouting? Could they have a card that they show? Make sure that they know what's next. Routine can be really reassuring. It may be possible to sit still for 5 minutes if they know it's only 5. If you've told them that it's 5 minutes, don't push it to 6, to 7, to 8, to 15, because they will lose trust in you. And next time they won't believe you when you say it's 5 minutes. Set reasonable expectations, and you may find that they can manage longer each time if the expectations are within their capabilities. What about communication? You need to keep your information clear and use appropriate vocabulary. That will help to prevent those misunderstandings and children getting overloaded with information. Remember that as the adrenaline goes up, their ability to process language goes down. Try to keep your instructions positive. So not stop kicking, but feet on the floor, please. Don't hit, but use gentle hands. Very often, if the adrenaline is up, the only word that they will hear is the last one. Do we really want to say stop kicking if the word that they will hear is kicking? Do we want to say don't hit if the word they will remember is hit? And sometimes they don't know what to do instead. So saying feet on the floor gives them a clear instruction. Give choices instead of commands. Would you like to? Could you? Would you rather? Use visuals if it's possible and appropriate, instead of using too many words. So you might use 2 pictures to give them a choice of activities. Remember privacy and dignity. If you need to say something about their behaviour, do it quietly and directly. Quietly meaning away from the other children. Don't make it personal. Be specific. Explain specifically what they are doing which is causing a problem. And this may apply to praise as well, depending on the child. Some children will find it very difficult to accept praise in front of others. And once you pick this up through your careful recording of behaviours, you'll know to take the child aside to give them praise. And be specific on what you're praising. Don't say, oh, you're a really good girl. Say, I really liked the way that you did this. Or the way that you did that was really good. So what about consequences? The key is we are not about punishing children. That's so important. And you need to really have that as your ethos. Some actions have natural consequences, and it can help sometimes to make these explicit, particularly if you can do so visually. Use if-then statements. If you do this, then this will happen. Sometimes it can be helpful to do the opposite if as well, the other choice. But if you do this, then this will happen. Show them that the other choice actually will work out better for them as well as for everybody else. Don't isolate children as an outcome, and do everything you can to avoid having to exclude them. These are the children that need acceptance, and often the parents that need support. Avoid shouting or ranting. It seems to go without saying, but this increases adrenaline. So it can actually exacerbate the behaviour, or it can make the child feel overwhelmed or threatened. And remember, you are the adults. So what about when all your preventative measures have failed and the proverbial hits the fan? It all goes pear-shaped. What do we do then? Keep calm and carry on. Safety is paramount. The safety of the child, of other children and the volunteers is your first priority. Property is the second priority. And if it's not putting any of these at risk, consider letting it run its course. Distract or even remove others from the close environment. If other children are at risk, move the other children. Don't try to move the one whose behaviour is challenging. Move the ones who are easily going to be moved elsewhere. Maybe take them outside for a game or something. Keep everything harmful out of reach, and this should be your normal practice anyway. I'm sure that your risk assessments will cover where you keep the scissors and the sharp knives. Use a calm voice, clear and concise instruction. Keep your language objective and relational. So I can see that you're angry, or I think you may be feeling frustrated about something. Can you tell me what it is? Offer options. Would you like to come and help me prepare the snack? Or it looks as though you need to make a noise. Should we get the drums out? If it's safe to do so, ignore the behaviour and just do something which might attract their attention elsewhere, but just within eyesight and earshot. If they're struggling to communicate, use pictures. And if the situation is unsafe, I know we've become very averse to touching children, but you may use the minimal amount of force for the minimum amount of time in order to ensure safety. Obviously, touching and holding children appropriately, guiding them, not grabbing them, and certainly not pinning them down. You may not leave a child alone. You may not leave them locked in, and you must not deal with them without a second person providing for safeguarding, even if that's through a window. These things are absolute sort of ground rules. What about if the child runs? If the child runs and you chase them, what's going to happen? They're going to run faster. They're going to enjoy the chase. And what's more, they're probably faster on their feet than you are. So instead, monitor them from a distance. And if possible, just one person do that, not a whole host of people going after them. Give them opportunity to come back. Allow a cool down time, but watch to ensure safety. So intervene only if necessary with minimum force and for minimum time. Do not drag them back or try to prevent them moving. I can remember one boy who ran and I followed him, and in the end I sat down on the floor and I said, James, I'm tired. I'm just going to sit down here. I'd love for you to come and sit down with me and tell me what's up. And he did. He came and he sat down alongside me, and then we walked back together. But he just needed a little bit of time to calm down. If they go and you cannot stop them and you don't know where they've gone, that's when you inform the parents, and you'll need to inform the police. Not because they've behaved so badly they need to be arrested, but because they will be at risk unless they're home. Obviously, that's why you would inform the parents home first, just in case they've gone home. And let's face it, that's where they're most likely to go. Keep really good written records. This is essential in this case because there may need to be an investigation, and debrief all those involved. Just coming back to that, think again about how you give that child options to be safe if they feel the need to run out and avoid something. That's where we've talked about the opt-out card. Agree with them somewhere safe that they can run to. And breathe. Your helpers and the child or children may need to calm down after the event. Remember the importance of recovery after stress, and also the benefit of having a caring person who helps you to recover. The helpers and child may need to debrief. Keep it short and simple and positive rather than accusatory. So not, you shouldn't have done this. This was naughty. This was what you did that was naughty. But what caused your problems? And what can we do to put it right next time? Relationships may need to be restored. Forgiveness is essential. The child should be given the chance to put things right, but should not be forced to apologise. Don't ever make a child say sorry, because if they're saying sorry because you've made them do it, they don't mean it, and it becomes meaningless. It actually undermines their ability to understand and experience remorse. So give them the chance to put things right, but don't force an apology. And any apology that is given should be graciously accepted. I once had a child come to me, well, he was a young person actually, he was about 13, and he just exploded in the classroom, metaphorically rather than literally, although he had punched the door. And he came to me in a high state of alertness, of anger. And eventually he calmed down and he said to me, I think I should go and apologise to Mr. B, shouldn't I? Would you come with me? Because it's not going to be easy. So I went with him and he walked into the classroom and said, Mr. B, I've come to say sorry. I'm really sorry for the way I behaved in your lesson. And the teacher's response, forgetting he was the adult, was to say, yeah, so you should be, but I'm not accepting your apology, and went on to rant again at him over what he'd done wrong. It was very difficult to get that child back into that classroom. Record the incident and use what you've learned. And help the child with strategies which might be better next time. So a safe place to run to, the fact that they could use a stress toy or a timeout card. It may get to the point where you need a behaviour contract. Don't do this until you have to. Save it as your last resort. Explain that the contract is to keep everybody safe and to enable the child to come to the club because you want them there. This is not a punitive thing, a behaviour contract. It's there to help you and to help the child make their interaction with the group successful. Draw the contract up between the club, the child and the parents, with everybody involved. And don't tackle everything. One thing at a time. What is the thing that makes it difficult for their behaviour, for them to continue being in the club? Safety is obviously the most important thing. If it's not affecting safety, I'd even question the need for a behaviour contract. But just tackle one thing. Make the consequences explicit and keep to them. Maybe 3 strikes, and after 3 warnings, you're not able to come to the next session. Try to avoid being punitive. So, don't say you won't ever be able to come again. We won't want you. And it should be time limited. It shouldn't last forever and always be hanging over that child's head. So actually within it, say, after 3 weeks or after 6 weeks, we may not even need this contract. So we'll revisit it in 6 weeks' time and have a chat about how it's going. So I'd like to thank you for your involvement in this webinar. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. If you have any questions, you can always email me, and a set of resources will be emailed out to everybody after the event. Thank you for your participation and for joining in so well, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.